Clyde, I have a confession to make at the top of the episode. I failed to identify the octopus that wraps around Brad's foot. I tried for a good half hour to identify that octopus, and I really tried. I tried harder to find that octopus than I did to pay attention to the episode.
I think you tried harder to find the octopus than to actually learn the players' names.
It was Brad, right?
I think it was Brad. I would need to go back and check.
Oh, boy. Well, I failed, but welcome to Survivor Analytics. I'm the failure and voice of the people. My name's Jack. I don't know what kind of octopus that was, and I've broken my perfect streak of animal identification on Survivor Cook Islands. With me, as always, is Clyde. Say hi, Clyde.
What's up, party people? I know all of our marine biologist listeners will be devastated. You were on a hot streak. Was it 2 weeks in a row of random animal shots?
Two weeks in a row of animal identification. And I looked up everything I could find about octopi or octopodes, sorry, don't come after me, in Cook Islands. All I could find were orange and red octopuses. And I couldn't find any white ones.
Oh, I'll also say that it was Adam that catches the octopus. That gets stuck on his leg. I will say, in that moment, Adam is way more calm than I would have been if I was in his shoes. Like, I would have been freaking out if it was stuck to my ankle like that.
He'd already stabbed it, right? And it took another guy full strength to pull it off.
Well, I would also be scared because I wouldn't have Jack there to identify the octopus for me, to let me know if it was a poisonous one or a safe one to be around.
I don't think there's any safe octopi to be around.
Really? Okay. The question then is, with this failure, is this another serious episode of the podcast? Because that was the tone for last week. Is this a somber episode?
I don't think it has to be a somber one, but I'll say this. I'm disappointed in myself. So that's the tone here, is that I'm trying to make up for my failure by offering more quality commentary in other aspects.
Okay.
So
I guess I can apologize out of the gate as well, though, because I didn't write an animal shot for the octopus this week after my stellar animal shot last week on the baby bird.
Oh, was that last week?
That was last week.
It went octopus, bird, octopus? Okay.
Yeah, we rotate back
Just
and forth. I did a little bit of deep dive on some Billy Garcia lore that I can share at some point during the podcast as well, because I know that's what all the listeners are coming to this for.
I mean, you might as well just share it now, because I don't really want to think about Billy Garcia halfway into this episode that he's not in.
Okay.
Clyde. He hasn't been in the show for a month.
Okay, let's do it at the beginning then. So in 2020, during lockdown, I think EW did quarantine questionnaires where they reached out to a bunch of past Survivor contestants and conducted mini interviews. And one of those players was Billy Garcia, where he said that him and Candace talked briefly in like the pre-game of the season, where I think they're all secluded somewhere. They had some type of conversation before that moment on the mat where Billy says that he loves her. So the edit presents it as this is their first time meeting and falling in love, when in reality, the love story had started like a week and a half prior. Going through those same quarantine questionnaires, I found out that Parvati and Nate met each other at casting for this season, and they went on one date between casting and before actually going on the show because they didn't know that they were selected yet. So there's a little bit of history between various lovebirds on this cast.
If you think about it, Billy Garcia is really the other side of the Parvati coin, right? They're the two seductresses of the season. That's cool. That's cool. I think you kind of buried the lead there with, here's a Billy Garcia fact for whoever the Garcia heads. But by the way, Nate and Parvati have an established bond, right? Like, that's a good note.
It's an important note, and it also contextualizes some of the content that we saw a couple weeks back where Nate seemed head over heels for Parvati right out of the gate.
So fast.
Yeah.
Right.
This adds a little bit of context to that relationship, and it also makes me think that Parvati could still be playing Nate, right? It seems like she's using him for strategic purposes, but she's not putting on a show. They seem to have a genuine connection in some way.
Yeah. Top of the episode. How did you feel about episode 5 of Survivor Cook Islands?
It's kind of more of the same for me. I'm still ready to
Yeah.
hit the merge of this season. There are some editing trends that are broken with this episode that I'll be excited to talk about, specifically surrounding the presentation of Christina. Like every episode prior to this one, a player gets trashed in the edit and then they go home. And this feels like the first time where the storyline pivots from that trend. So I thought the editing was a little bit unique. Not as many crazy character moments here, but I feel like we learned a lot more about the dynamics on the island, especially on the I2 tribe.
Yeah, we do start to see some more lines really starting to form. There's still some crazy character moments. I mean, we'll get to... Well, Cowboy has a couple,
Cowboy's
right?
on the cast. Like, that's an unavoidable part of the episode.
But there is a little bit more development. It's starting to feel more like Survivor. I mean, spoiler alert, I can't wait for next week because we know 2 people are going home next week, right? Like,
oh, we do?
You got to watch the next time on, Clyde. Jeff says in the next time on, no matter who wins, both tribes are going to council.
Okay, that's essential then. We need to start cutting down this cast.
Let's jump in with the Raro fellas who post JP elimination are terrified about the stability of masculine power on their tribe. Because there are less men than women, the men have decided that the best way to prove their worth is by making themselves redundant for the future. What I mean by that is they decide to work their asses off and provide the women with so much food and fuel that if I were the women of Raro, I would think, we've had all the work done for us. We can continue to vote them off because Nate specifically decides to collect wood. And I have never seen somebody carry so many branches and sticks in my life. Did you notice this? He's carrying 40 branches at once. It's comical. It's absurd. And the women are having a great time with it. I love it. It's a great vibe.
I saw this scene and I knew you would be jumping out of your seat because it's essentially a Meat Boy montage. We get Adam collecting crabs, Nate gathering the firewood, Brad fishing in the ocean. Like the 2022 version of Jack, when we first started watching Samoa, would fall in love with this segment of the episode. I think this one is meant for like the Facebook moms, the people that go on to Survivor thinking it's purely about just surviving on an island.
I mean, I liked the survival aspect of it, but I also really liked I wrote down that it was a jaunty montage, right? It had some whimsical music. It kind of had a Seven Dwarves going off to the mines kind of vibe. I don't remember that song, but it had that vibe of like they're whistling as they work. And they're putting in a ton of work because they are convinced that this is enough to save them and to prove the women need to vote out one of their own, right?
Yeah.
It is what it is, but it's pretty hilarious. You know, I love the Meat Boy mentality of if I carry enough sticks, I'm valuable. That's fantastic. That's so funny to me.
Well, it's also hilarious because it's the exact opposite approach from just an episode or 2 back, where they were hanging out on the boat saying, we don't need to help out around camp because they need to keep the Meat Boys around for challenges.
It's rattled them for sure. And then meanwhile, over on I2, Cowboy is frustrated by the women of his tribe because they aren't doing any work. Specifically, I didn't write down their names. I don't remember who it is.
I think it's Sandra, Becky, and Candace. This scene is interesting because it portrays those 3 women as lazy, where I saw this more as Sandra working her way into that majority alliance. Like later on in the episode, we see Yul approach Sandra and say, we want to pull you into our group. And the edit makes it look like this is entirely Yul's doing. Like he's the godfather deciding who gets to be a part of his club and who's excluded. When in reality, I feel like Sandra played a part in that navigation into the majority.
Let me push back on that just a little bit because I think Yul is kind of taking the lead, but I don't think he's making decisions unilaterally. It's more of like he will speak for the trees kind of situation. Like he's not bossing the trees around, he's speaking for them. Yul the Lorax. But yeah, I mean, we see Sandra starting to work her way into that group. And the other thing that comes up a couple times with Candace It comes up here and later on when the Kooky Squad decide to go on a little adventure. There's some load management here where Candace is very conscious of, I'm not going to do anything that burns a ton of unnecessary energy, right? She doesn't want to go, row across the lagoon just to see what's over there. And so I think there's a couple things at play here. And the edit kind of oversimplifies it to Cowboy is frustrated by the women who are checking out their armpits, right? Because that's what they're like, having conversation about their armpits for some reason. But that's all I've got.
Yeah, same. I'm good to go to reward if you want. We get 2 challenges this week.
Yeah, 2 challenges and 2 pretty good challenges. I was thoroughly whelmed by this episode as a whole, right? It was strategically not super interesting, but challenge-wise, pretty good episode. To break down the reward challenge here real quick, they're playing for more fishing gear, spices, which I thought was interesting, and a couple bottles of wine. And the challenge itself is 6 players from each tribe, which is a sign already that you have too many players on both tribes. When you have 6 players in part of the challenge, but 3 pairs of 2 have to each, they're holding on to each other, and then they also have to hold on to a handle. And over time, members of the other tribe can add weight to the end of that handle. Interesting twist on the classic weight endurance formula. Adds a competitive element to it. So I've got the pairs here if we want to get into it.
I have the name of the challenge.
Oh, what's it called?
It's called Shoulder the Load.
That's not a great name, but it's pretty spot on.
What? See, I like these names. I feel like you're a hater with a lot of the Survivor Challenge names.
You know what I think it is? Is they're named like Mario Party games, where it's like, oh, that's kind of a cute thing for a 5-year-old. Pairs. Jonathan and Yule, Sandra and Candace, Ozzy and Jessica, although Jeff still will not call her Flicka.
Of course.
And then over on Raro, Nate and Adam, Rebecca and Stephanie, and Christine and Brad, right?
Christina.
Damn it. Christina and Brad. The same conceptual breakdown, right? A meat boy pair, a pair of women, and then a mixed pair. I don't remember it being specified that they had to do that, but both tribes end up with the same configuration. Nate really wants some wine. He is determined to win this challenge. He says a couple times he's ready to get faded off the wine.
Yeah, he makes it very clear that his goal is to get blasted after the challenge. There were moments where you could tell Jeff was rooting for Nate's side because I think he just wanted to see what would happen if you take, the good-looking group of Parvati and Nate and Adam and throw wine into the mix when they haven't eaten or drank much water for the last 2 weeks and just see what happens from there. So I felt that Jeff was pulling for the Raros here. I think there's one moment where Jeff says, we can wait a little more, and Jonathan calls him out for the pun, but Jeff doesn't even recognize Jonathan. He's solely focused on the Meat Boys and rooting for that Raro group.
There's so many puns in this section that it felt like there was a writer off screen feeding them to the players. Because Flicka makes one. There's a few in there, right? Boil down the challenge really quick. Raro has a clean sweep. I2 goes down in order. Jonathan and Yule, Sandra and Candace, Ozzy and Flicka. 1, 2, 3. I don't believe, unless I missed one, Raro doesn't have a single tribe or a single pair, drop.
Yeah, I think they have a clean sweep here.
And the winning tribe, I forgot to mention this earlier, gets to send somebody to Exile Island. And for some reason, they decide to send Jonathan again. But here, we'll come back to that. What were you going to say?
Going on the topic of the reward for this, the winning tribe earns additional fishing supplies with that bottle of wine. So when Jeff said that, I was immediately rooting for the Raro tribe because I wanted to see how Ozzy would respond to losing the fishing gear. We know that Ozzy's obsessed with fishing. I feel like there's been multiple segments already this season of the underwater camera following his feet as he gets like a 3-inch fish from the bottom of the water.
Yeah.
And I knew if they lost, he would be furious, but I don't think he responds too negatively after they lose this one. I was a bit underwhelmed on that front.
Because it was more fishing gear, right? They've got some. If you lose a reward like this, right, especially when one of you is about to be sent to exile, I don't think you're going to spend too much time disappointed. The stakes are lower. There's another thing about to happen. You could write it off, especially when it wasn't like comfort or clothing or, I don't know, sunglasses, right? It wasn't something new. It was kind of more of the same and some, not even food, but just added comfort. That's okay to write off. Let's talk about the exile. They get to exile somebody, and very quickly, Rero says, we want to send somebody again, right? We want somebody to go back to exile. Why?
Yeah, so I think there's two real approaches with picking the same person. One is that you could potentially paint a target on their back. If your philosophy is you go to exile, that increases your chances of finding the idol. It'll present you as a threat amidst your tribe, which is weird because it seems like Adam and some of the original Reros are the ones campaigning for Jonathan to go back to exile. In my mind, you would want to try to protect Jonathan as much as possible, which brings up the other side of the argument where by sending Jonathan over and over again, he's more likely to have that idol that he could use to support his original alliance later on in the game. Unbeknownst to them, the idol's been found for 3 weeks now? So it's been chilling in Yule's bag for a minute. So you can really go either way with it.
So in this interstitial time, right, between the two challenges, well, there's a few things that go on here, actually. We miss the entire consumption of the wine.
Yeah.
The next shot after Jonathan walks off to Exile Island is 2 empty bottles of wine and everybody on Rero waking up the next morning. Oh, they drank all of it and they're like, man, I slept so well after all that. Like, that's it.
That's important content to include. I want to see, especially if you're going to include the segments of Nate saying, I can't wait to get faded with the wine. That story needs to reach its conclusion. I want to see Nate drunk on his ass at the Rero camp, flirting with Parvati, jumping in the water, getting some additional sticks. I want to see the Rero party that we missed out on. We have the whole segment at Rero with Adam catching the octopus, and
whatever that octopus is, I'm sorry.
And now it's time to actually cook the octopus. And there's an entire saga here where Christina drops the octopus in the ocean and she blames Jenny, claiming that I guess Jenny was on octopus watch, even though Jenny clearly said, I'm walking back over to camp.
This is such a wild little sequence. So just to break it down, Christina walks into the water with a basket of octopus, spills a bunch of it, goes, oh no, I thought Jenny was going to take care of the thing I set down in the ocean. Jenny's 30 yards away.
Yeah.
And Christina's like, oh no, I'm picking up all the pieces. It's fine. There really isn't a problem.
It seems like they didn't lose that much of the octopus anyway.
By deciding to, for some reason, pass the buck on the octopus, it escalates this dialogue of everybody hates Christina.
She's the bully cop of the Rero tribe now. Jenny says that Christina is the new JP.
Let me say this, except for the thing with Jenny, right? Everything we'd seen before this, because we had another little scene earlier in the episode where she starts talking about cooking some food and she's talking about what they need to cook the meal, right? She's kind of the head chef of the tribe. Have you seen The Bear?
I have not.
Good show. And it's basically about how sometimes you have to be an asshole in a kitchen, and that doesn't mean that you're a villain. It means like it's a high efficiency place, and sometimes being an asshole is the fastest way to move, right? That's not all The Bear's about. It's a great show. It kind of feels like, well, you've seen Ratatouille, of course. She is Gusteau. She's not a villain. She's just making her food. And, you know, she's got her little rat pulling her hair, trying to make the food, and everybody else is like, oh, I hate her for trying to cook a good meal. I don't get the Christine hate. I really don't.
Well, a lot of the hate in the Rero tribe doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I don't understand the Christine hate. I don't understand the Stephanie hate that we'll talk about later in the episode. Like, some of these characters just come forward as antagonists for all of 10 minutes on the show. And I kind of hit on this earlier, but with this entire segment, I assumed Christina was going home this week because we saw it every other episode this season. In the premiere, Sekou is an overbearing force at camp. He goes home in episode 1. In episode 2, Billy is sleeping on the beach, not contributing to camp life. He goes home that week. Just the previous episode, I think we open with JP directing people around the fire, and he goes home. So there's a very clear, established format for the Cook Islands pre-merge where you look either mean or lazy in the first half of the episode, and then you go home in the second half. The only player that's the exception to this rule is, can you fill in the blank? It's someone we talk about all the time.
Billy.
No, Cowboy is the one exception to that rule.
I was trying to think of somebody who was eliminated who you didn't just list.
No.
I was so... Okay.
The only missed person there is Cecilia, but she was invisible in the edit to begin with. But Cowboy's the only player that week after week gets a negative edit. He's seen as, an isolated figure socially. He makes racist comments around camp, yet he sticks around for the next episode. So,
I mean, that's a very good point, but let's move from that Cowboy topic into Cowboy's adventure.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Yeehaw! Welcome to the Cowboy adventure. Ozzy, Flicka, and Cowboy, the quirky girl alliance of the season, decide they are going to go sail across the lake or lagoon, or I don't think they kept calling it a lake or a lagoon or something like that. It's just the ocean between their island and another island. I don't think you can call that a lagoon. They try to get some people to go with them. Nobody wants to go. While they're gone, we see the Yule and Becky, Sundra negotiation, but I'll come back to that. So they go on this adventure, and it turns out that the island they're going to, this feels like a Minecraft situation, right? And maybe that's me coming from a background of, I played a lot of Minecraft, but they don't have enough food on their island, so they go to the next one, and they're like, we'll just go pick it clean. And then they realize somebody's already there, and it's the other tribe's island. They have just figured out accidentally, they've never realized somehow that the two beaches are 20 minutes paddle apart. How do you not realize that?
Especially from Flicka's perspective, because this is the Raro camp that they're attending, right? Flicka lived there for the first 2 weeks of the season.
Oh my God. I mean, it's ridiculous that they don't know. But so they sail to the other side. They don't say to themselves, weird, there's trails on this island. Because they're walking down a path, and they find the other tribe, the Raro camp, right? Who is it that says, oh, it's the three we can't stand?
It was off camera. They show the text at the bottom of the screen, but it's not clear who makes that comment. And that was really surprising to me. I think we knew at this point in the season that no one was really a fan of Cowboy or Flicka, but I never put Ozzy in that same kooky category with the other two. As far as I knew, Ozzy was pretty well integrated socially until this week. Now it seems like the entire Raro camp dislikes him. Maybe Christina spread some bad information about Ozzy with throwing the challenge to knock out Billy, but they don't respect Christina either. So I don't know what Ozzy did to necessarily earn this reputation. And then over on the I2 camp, Yule is very transparent in that he does not trust Ozzy at all. All the fishing is not earning Ozzy any brownie points right now.
I wonder in this situation, no matter what Ozzy or Flicka have done to earn the dislike, right, of the Raro tribe, Cowboy, by association, drags them both down. Because Cowboy, somehow, I don't know how they get to this point, right? They show up. They're not like, hey, guys, sorry, we didn't realize this was your island. Somehow, we'll get out of your hair. Cowboy sits down and is like, let's hang out. What's up, everybody? Starts rambling. We get a montage of Cowboy's ramblings about symbology, the Chinese zodiac, right? It's nonsensical. He is just motor mouthing.
A chef's kiss to the editors in this segment, because as Cowboy is talking, they'll take his audio and fade it in and out to really emphasize how long this is going on for, and they'll splice that with scenes of the clouds moving in like fast forward to really emphasize how long he was talking for.
Yeah.
I wish one of the contestants on Raro came out after the show and said how long Cowboy chilled at their camp and gave them this monologue.
I would love to know because it feels like it was a half hour.
Oh, I think longer. I think it could easily be an hour.
Oh, man. I feel like if Cowboy had been on a season in 2024, he'd have a podcast and we'd be throwing stones at somebody from our glass house. But absolute nonsense aside, eventually they leave.
Before they leave, Cowboy throws one last jab and he says, can we take some of your spices back to our island? Like, Cowboy, are you serious right now? It's wild. I will say this is kind of unprecedented. I can't think of another time where two tribes came together in the pre-merge without some kind of production interference. Like we saw in Samoa, there was the kidnapping twist, if you remember, and in China, where a contestant on the opposing tribe would visit the other camp with some clue to an immunity idol. It's rare that you just see contestants look at production and say, I'm not going to listen to your rules. I'm just going to go visit the other group anyway. Like, theoretically, could all of I2 pack up all their stuff and just move to Raro?
I want a raid, actually. I want them to go over at midnight and take all their food.
Oh,
like, I want this to get hostile.
I would love that, but I doubt Cowboy could do that discreetly.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it's wild. It's pretty funny, but it is absolutely wild. And I think I would be shocked if any of those three, right, Cowboy, Ozzy, or Flicka, have much luck making alliances with some of these people if they make the merge.
Oh, I'm rooting for that 3 to be the end game of the season.
So the only other thing I have before the next challenge is Exile.
Well, the one thing that I would want to hit on is the fact that Sundra has now navigated her way into the majority at I2. So that alliance now consists of Yul and Becky, core pair, Candace Jonathan, core pair, and Sundra in the middle between the two. And it seems like when Yul makes this pitch to rope in Sundra, he's doing it partially to isolate Flicka and Cowboy that worked with them in the previous vote. But it seems like he never considers roping Ozzy.
Well, he doesn't trust him.
And I'm not sure why. Like, Sundra herself campaigns for Ozzy. She asks, like, oh, can we get Ozzy in the mix? And Yul says no. Like, I don't know what Ozzy has necessarily done on I2 to make everybody have this perception of him.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's just a gut check, right? I mean, we saw after the vote a couple weeks ago where he was like, yeah, I don't want to fish anymore because I lost my closest ally, right? Maybe some of that negativity and apathy manifested in his attitude around camp, right? If he's a little bit sullen, it could be enough for somebody to be like, yeah, I don't really want to work with him. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting, especially because Becky and Yul have done a lot of work and worked together. Jonathan and Candace have been like alternating, being present for negotiations and strategy.
Because of the Exile twist.
And so while it is two pairs with Sundra in between, that pair is much weaker, I think, than Becky and Yul. And so I think it'll be interesting to see how this group of 5 evolves. And speaking of Jonathan, he goes to Exile Island, digs a massive trench. His line is that you could bury Yao Ming. I hope Yao Ming's doing well. I feel like he's the commissioner of like the Chinese Basketball Association or something. He was the time. This jumps around all over the time. At least at one point, he was the president of the Chinese Basketball Association.
Oh, okay.
He was the 6th president. Like, this article jumps around time-wise like crazy. He owns the Shanghai Sharks.
Big shout out to Yao Ming for the episode. Potentially
Friend
in the
of the
running
show.
For an honorable mention this week. We'll have to wait and see. Going over to immunity, before we talk about the challenge itself, Jeff brings Jonathan back in. And when he returns to the game, Jeff asks him, like, oh, did you find the idol? And he says,
Yeah.
He knows where the idol used to be, but it isn't there anymore. And this makes zero sense to me, because Jonathan's essentially saying that someone else found the idol. So he's attempting to paint a target on another player's back. So let's look. Who are the people who have attended Exile so far that could have found the idol? It's either Jonathan, so painting a target on himself, Candace, someone he's aligned with, Yul, a member of his core alliance, and Adam, someone he was aligned with through Rero. So maybe this is just a move of self-preservation to say, somebody's got it, it's not me. But I feel like you might want to answer that question a little bit more generically as to not put the heat on any of your allies. But it is surprising that every contestant that has attended Exile is in some way connected to Jonathan.
The only way I can give him a little credit for this move is he's just spent 24 hours alone. Yeah, maybe he's just a little crazy, right? If I'm Jonathan, I'm ready to get back to camp and bring in those people and say, one-on-one, hey, do you have it? I didn't find it, but I know where it was. Like, let's compare notes, right?
Yeah, and that's something we never see this week. Like, I would expect Jonathan to approach Yule with that conversation in the next episode.
You know what? Here's what happened this week. There's one crew, because there's a rotation of filming crews, right? They're filming all the time. They can't all be working every single shift. There's a shift of cameramen on this crew who forgot to put the battery in their cameras this week. And it's the crew who filmed that conversation, and it's the crew who filmed the wine party. They came back to headquarters, the production tent, and they're like, guys, we got the best footage. Nate was shit-faced. They got crazy. Brad kissed an octopus, right? Whatever.
They said Christina's name correctly. It was wild. They didn't call her Christine the entire night.
It's the best footage of the season. Great, plug it in. Oh, no. Oh, God, we forgot to film it. What have we done?
We forgot to hit record. See, I have a different theory where the Rero tribe was having such a fun time that they roped the camera crew into their festivities.
Oh, it was a little bit of, like when a BBC film crew helps the baby seals.
Yeah, there was a bit of malpractice there where the film crew said, we're in a lot of the shots drinking from the wine bottle with the contestants. This won't look great on the air. We wiped the footage by accident. It was lost. We dropped the camera in the ocean alongside some of Christina's octopus.
This sounds like it makes perfect sense.
But how did we get here? What were we talking about?
We were talking about the challenge. So Jonathan comes back. He blabs. We don't see any tactical stuff from him. But shall we continue with the challenge?
Yeah.
So I like this challenge. Both teams need to assemble long poles with little platforms on the end, and they will use those essentially as a moving bridge to get two tribe members, across one platform to another in the water. Once those two members are on the second platform, everybody needs to swim from that platform to a little platform and get on top of this little thing that's probably, what would you say, 2 feet square?
Yeah, it is small for the number of people they have to fit on top.
It is tiny for the numbers, and it's a fun challenge. Is there a name for this one?
Probably. I didn't pull it up. You don't seem to appreciate the challenge names, so I don't know if my efforts are best fit in this area.
I like hearing them, but I'm not consistently impressed by them.
You like hearing them and scoffing at them every time.
So Motion is the only good one I remember, and the last gasp is pretty great.
Okay.
Pretty good challenge, straightforward. Rero is in the lead, but at the final tower, I2 manages to get everybody up onto the little platform before Rero. I2 wins. Rero will head to Tribal.
And I do like this challenge a lot. Do you think this is something they would still run today? Or do you feel like the physicality of fitting everybody on top of that stool might not be as appropriate on Modern Survivor?
I feel like you'd have to modify it. But the platform section, I think you could do again.
You mean the platform where they're taking the two girls across?
The pole section. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen in the past where sometimes they don't even bother walking their way across the water, where instead they'll just have one girl stand on the pole, and then the group will just walk that pole over to the other end.
That's so funny. I feel like they could have done that in China, and James just carries Todd and Natalie across.
Natalie? You mean Courtney?
Not Courtney. Sorry.
Man, the disrespect to Courtney, the second place finisher of China. Many people forget. They always think it's Amanda.
I'm a big Courtney fan. Don't get me wrong. I just forgot her name. But anyway, we head back to camp, and it's really coalesced into everybody wants Christina gone until Stephanie has a nonchalant comment to Nate. They're at the water well or something, And Stephanie says, like, I could see myself going tonight. And, if I get to go have some mashed potatoes tonight for dinner, I wouldn't be upset, right? I could really go for some mashed potatoes. She's not throwing in the towel, but she's saying, like, yeah, if I go, life's okay.
I read this as a very throwaway comment where contestants talk about food all the time and the meals they miss because they're literally starving out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't read this as Stephanie quitting the game. It was more so her saying, oh, I sure missed that mashed potatoes and gravy. And when Nate hears this, every alarm bell goes off in his brain and he runs to Adam and Brad saying that Stephanie wants to quit the game entirely. It's just like last week where she called herself the weakest link.
Yeah, I mean, it's this weird misinterpretation. And when Parvati goes to Stephanie and says, hey, are you thinking about quitting? Like, are you done? She's like, no, I still want to be in the game. I didn't say anything like that.
I feel like on this season, like in Modern Survivor, we get a lot of strategic decisions leading up to Tribal. What's the optimal move for me? Whereas in Cook Islands, there's a lot of misunderstandings before Tribal. We have Stephanie like fake quitting a week ago, calling herself the weakest link, and literally the same thing happening here. With this entire situation unraveling, do you see this more as a misunderstanding on Nate's end or a misstep by Stephanie herself?
Stephanie didn't do anything wrong. Saying, oh, I could go for a bowl of mashed potatoes and gravy, there is nothing wrong with that. Nate running with it and misinterpreting it to this extreme level, I don't hate it as a move, right? Oh, so-and-so wants to quit. This is what she told me, right? If one person misinterprets it, everybody will. The lines are much clearer over on I2. There's a clear majority. There's a clear minority. Here, the lines are so blurry on Rero that when they vote Stephanie out, Nate gives her a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Like, it's like he thinks he's doing community service by getting her off the island.
I wish we had more insight on Nate's end, where I can't tell if he's just targeting her as a way to help her leave the island and go get that mashed potatoes and gravy, or he sees some kind of strategic benefit in knocking out Stephanie here. Because we need to keep in mind that Stephanie and Nate have not really worked alongside each other the entire season, despite being on the original Hiki tribe. Like, you might remember in the premiere, Stephanie was the one playing the middle between Sundra and Rebecca on one side and Nate and Sekou on the other. So, like, Stephanie stabbed Nate in the back early on. And if Nate went into confessional and said, Stephanie screwed me over, I'm going to take this comment by her and run with it to knock her out of the game, then that's a very impressive move. But as far as I know, this seems just like a misunderstanding on Nate's part. And he's kind of just stumbling his way into this decision.
Yeah, I mean, it really feels like that. Nobody on this tribe except Parvati seems concerned with playing the game of Survivor. Everyone else is like, either let's vote somebody out because we kind of don't like her, Christina, or let's vote somebody out because she doesn't want to be here, we think, Stephanie, right? And it's such an old school mentality. It felt like a farce of a vote. It's so strange. And there's so many people who we don't hear anything from. Like, I have no idea where Jenny's head is at.
Yeah.
In terms of alliance or tactic. Same with Brad.
We know Jenny had the beef with Christina earlier in the episode, yet she ultimately does not vote against Christina at the tribal council. Jenny was also one of the key players that assembled that women's alliance in the JP vote. So I thought there was a chance that, before this entire episode even opened, that Rero would be dominated by that women's group. And you would have like Nate, Adam, and Brad all on the bottom pleading to stay in the game. And it seems like that women's alliance fell apart in just 1 week. I'll also note that Stephanie does not seem to be really concerned with this rumor circulating around camp. She has a confessional where she says that she believes her efforts have proven that she wants to stay in the game, and she doesn't want to beg other players to keep her around. And I'll say my piece of advice to future Survivor players is don't be afraid to beg. Like, you don't want to be on the Banu extreme where you're literally on your knees praying for a player to keep you in the game. But you shouldn't just throw in the towel if you hear these rumors around your camp. Like, you need to put in some effort. So when I go back to evaluate Stephanie at the end of the season in my player rankings, that's something I'll really struggle with because I feel like she's getting targeted and later voted out due to a very weird circumstance, but she also doesn't do much about it to prevent it.
If you know there's a rumor going around and all you have to do is say, hey, not the case. That's all you got to do. I mean, I feel like we don't even need to dwell on tribal. Basically, the only thing there is Christina finds out people don't like her, and it's news to her.
Which is absurd. Nate straight up calls her out in tribal council, saying that she can be overbearing around camp. And in the back of Nate's mind, he knows that he plans on voting out Stephanie. So he's willing to just throw these insults at Christina and they deal with the repercussions later when he goes back to camp. So I don't really know what Nate's thinking there, just willingly burning that bridge out of nowhere. And I think in the next time on, we see some combative scenes of Christina. So I do remember that one segment.
Yes.
I'll also note that the tribal council opens with Jeff once again waving his fist in the air, angry that the Meat Boys are not succeeding. He asks the tribe about challenge performance and he directs it to Adam. He's begging Adam, please do better in these challenges so we can keep all of the Meat Boys around for the post-merge. But your final vote here is unanimous. We get 7 on Stephanie, 1 on Christina. Steffi goes home in the pre-merge.
Insane.
You were not expecting a unanimous vote?
I really wasn't, because I was certain that somebody would be like, this goes back to the edit, I guess, and maybe this is part of their, like, blindsiding the viewer, right? But I really thought that the, let's get rid of Stephanie thing wasn't going to make it to everybody. It is what it is, right? It's not like either of them are spectacular players. Here's my problem.
Okay.
We're 5 weeks in, and it feels like we're still trimming the hedges. We're not to the material strategic play yet. There aren't lines in the sand. We're still getting rid of people because they are either annoying or don't want to be here. Has anyone been voted out for being a threat?
No, I don't think so. Maybe JP, you could argue they said he was like a leader capable of gathering people behind him, and that was the philosophy, but it seemed more like that vote came from the fact that they just didn't like JP.
Yeah.
But I'd be curious for your opinion, since you're the number one Christine fan, just personally, were you hoping that Stephanie went home here instead of Christine?
To be honest, I don't care. I want to get to the point where they're both gone. Like, I feel bad for Stephanie that she's not in the game anymore.
See, I cared. I was rooting for Stephanie to stick around. I think Stephanie's a fun, chaotic player on the cast that kind of shoots herself in the foot over and over again. Like, I think she's added more to this season than Christina, who had the rivalry with Ozzy. You know, she has a little rivalry with Jenny, but I think Stephanie brought some better moments to the pre-merge. Do you think Stephanie comes back for a future season?
No.
You are correct. Stephanie does not return in the future. This transitions well to my dishonorable mention of the episode, which is the Survivor Press. I mentioned I looked up those 2020 quarantine questionnaires, and that series excluded Stephanie. I would have loved to hear more about what she's doing 15 years later after Survivor, probably eating mashed potatoes and gravy.
It's a cloudy with a chance of meatballs situation where, like, her house is just a mountain of mashed potatoes and gravy, and she's just trying to eat her way into her house.
I think Stephanie's an underrated player. I would argue that, well, no, Billy Garcia is here. Outside of Billy,
oh my God,
she's the player from the pre-merge that I would most want to see come back of the 5 that we've covered so far.
So, I mean, so far, I totally agree, but that's a low bar. I don't want to hate on Stephanie. I'm sure she's a fine player, but we're 5 weeks in, and I feel as little about her as I feel about the first 2 boots in any season.
What? I feel so much more connected to her. I think she has an interesting story arc where, like, the season opens with her criticizing Sekou because Sekou makes that pitch of, you need to keep me in the game because I'm contributing to camp life. Meanwhile, the camp is in terrible shape. She opens the season as the voice of reason regarding the original Hiki camp, and then you fast forward 3 weeks, and she's throwing herself under the bus. Like, I think that's a more interesting storyline than someone like Cecilia, who I still know nothing about.
I mean, that's fair. And maybe that is the cautionary tale of Stephanie, right? Is sometimes being a level-headed, normal person makes you the outsider. because she says a normal, level-headed thing like, I would love some mashed potatoes and gravy right now, and gets kicked off the show for it. Really, I feel like I know so little about so many characters still. The only way out is through, and I'm ready to get deeper into this season and actually really get to know some players. But
last question for Stephanie. Would you argue that Stephanie was quote-unquote robbed on this season? Like, would you say her elimination is the most unjust of the ones so far?
Yeah,
I think so too. I feel like every other character that's been booted is more responsible for their own downfall than Stephanie, outside of Billy, but I'm biased. So let's go to winners and losers. Where do you want to start?
Let's do winners.
Winners, I have Sundra. Do you have the same one?
I have Yul.
Oh, okay. So I'll give my Sundra spiel. Basically, she maneuvers her way into the majority alliance of I2 while still maintaining a connection to Ozzy, who's on the outside of that group. So I'll be interested to see how much agency Sundra has in that majority going forward. At some point, I2 will attend a tribal council. You said next week that both groups will attend. And
yeah,
I want to see if Sundra is able to keep the target off Ozzy, who is apparently on the bottom. It seems like a pretty easy task for her because Flicka and Cowboy are way worse in the challenge side of the game.
Right.
But I think next week will be the first time where Sundra's really tested within this new alliance.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally fair. Like, honestly, I gave it to Yul because he grew his alliance and added her, right? There was a clip of Sundra in a hammock, I think, and she was like sort of ambivalent about being in the alliance, willing to play the middle of the road, right? Which I like in a player, you know. I liked that a lot in Charlie. I liked it in Carson. But I think I gave it to Yul because A, he's got the idol, and B, he is so prominent in his alliance and so soft-spoken in everything else that I feel like he will be in a comfortable position for a little while. Where somebody caught in the middle like Sundra, right, if she makes one wrong choice, could be out.
Do you agree with Yul's decision to push Cowboy out of that alliance? Because that's someone he's known since day one.
Yes.
Even if Cowboy's, a lunatic, they still have a long connection.
He's a lunatic who they could still pull for a vote. They're just not calling it an alliance. That's fine. Like, I don't think he's shutting the door on Cowboy. He's just not building a tunnel between them.
We can go to losers next. My loser is Ozzy. I think this is Ozzy's worst episode of the entire season, where the edit presents him very positively through the first 4 weeks. He's the provider of the tribe. He loves to fish. He has some strategic agency when he leads the Billy Garcia vote, RIP. But this is the first time where Ozzy's presented as an outcast, where he's literally clumped together with Flicka and Cowboy, the two players who I think have probably the worst social game on the island right now.
It's kind of a Breakfast Club vibe. They're the losers table for sure.
Yeah, and like, this sounds bad. I understand why Cowboy and Flicka are at the losers table, and especially according to old school Survivor standards, Ozzy is your ideal meat boy contestant. He's young, he's good looking, he's athletic, he provides. He seems like the type of player that would excel in the early game, yet he's still on the outside there. So I feel like his stock took the biggest hit this week, which made him my loser.
That's totally fair. My loser is Christina because she's on the bottom of a tribe that seems willing to vote anybody out for looking the wrong way.
That could play to her favor, though, right? If someone else says the wrong thing to Nate next week, that can easily push the target off Christina.
Maybe. But, we see in the next time on, they're going to have a little confrontation, right? She doesn't have a lot of friends on the island. I mean, I don't see things working out well for Christina.
I already gave my dishonorable. Do you have an honorable?
My honorable mention is Yao Ming, exiled former. I did a little more Googling while you were talking. He has been kicked out of his position as the president of the Chinese Basketball Association. The board of directors kicked him out. He owns a team that was banned for cheating in the playoffs last year. The coaches and management of the Shanghai Sharks have been banned from Chinese basketball for 5 years. And just a few days ago, Noah Vonleh, does that ring a bell?
Yeah, he's the 4th overall pick. I think he went to the Hornets maybe a while back, but he was a high-end draft pick like around a decade ago.
A few days ago, went viral. The Shanghai Sharks weren't letting him into his room in his hotel or something and hadn't paid him his playoff bonus. And so he was having to sleep in the lobby of a hotel.
What?
Like, this is literally like 5 days ago. Yeah, shout out to Yao Ming, who I think is struggling with his management skills as the owner of the most controversial team in. It sounds like they're the Houston Astros of Chinese basketball.
I'll also say that I was wrong. Noah Vonleh was the 9th overall pick to the Charlotte Hornets, not the 4th. So
Man.
I got to pay my respects. But either way, he's sleeping on that couch, regardless of what pick he was back in 2014. Well, thanks for listening to this week's episode of Survivor Analytics. We'll be back next week as we continue to get through the dog days of Survivor Cook Islands.
I think we're on our way out. 2 people voted out next week.
2 people voted out next week, but that'll still take us from, we're at 15 right now. That'll take us to just 13. We still might have another episode or 2 after that in the pre-merge. So it's the summer, right? The sun is beating down. My apartment is 90 plus degrees, and we're just working our way through the pre-merge here, but we appreciate everybody that's sticking along for the ride.
See you next week.